Self-compassion. Welcome to a new and short course titled Self-compassion, taken from the book Training Courses by Muteb Alqarni. In this course, we will discuss the techniques, methods, and obstacles of self-compassion. It can be said from the outset that self-compassion is not different in value and importance from self-esteem. If self-esteem demands that you appreciate yourself and take pride in your accomplishments, then self-compassion demands that you stand with yourself and accept your failures. If self-esteem is the stronghold against psychological disorders and a preventive measure against them, then self-compassion is the protective shield against the continuation of psychological disorders and a barrier to their recurrence after treatment. Let's start the course with two questions. 1. What if your friend told you today that they spoke in front of an audience and stumbled and fell in front of them? How would you console them? And 2. What if your friend confessed and said he feels shame and embarrassment because he fell into ruin and sin? It is expected that you would console him in the first case and say, "Don't dwell on your stumble, people fall, and it's normal, so don't dwell on it." And you might console him in the second case and say in a friendly way, "Everyone makes mistakes, just move on, as everyone makes mistakes, so don't worry about it." Such responses are expected as consolation for friends, but the important question, what if you were the one who fell and stumbled in front of the crowds? And what if you were the one who fell into ruin and sin? What would you say to yourself? Would you say the same thing you said to your friend? You might be surprised that you wouldn't say to yourself what you said to your friend, but rather, you would become more critical and rejecting of yourself despite it being the same mistakes. This raises questions about self-compassion. Why does a person console others while criticizing themselves when they fall into the same mistakes? Why do they sympathize with others and understand their mistakes and accept them, while they cannot sympathize with themselves and understand their mistakes and accept them? Why do people treat others as they would like to be treated, but do not treat themselves as they would like to treat others? Why do they like to treat people with mercy, acceptance, and understanding, when they make mistakes, while they treat themselves with harshness and rejection when they make the same mistakes? The answer to the above will show us why we sympathize with others and why we fail to sympathize with ourselves. In this course, we will try to answer the previous questions by saying that there are 3 fallacies that make a person sympathize more with others than with themselves. Fallacy 1. Feeling that other people's selves are not their property, and therefore feeling that they have no right to criticize them, while feeling that their own self is their own property and they have every right to criticize it as they wish. Fallacy 2. Seeing others as separate individuals from oneself while being unable to see oneself as a separate individual, for oneself and oneself are one entity. Fallacy 3. Feeling that others are weak, fallible, ignorant humans deserving of pity when they make mistakes, while seeing oneself as rational, mature, and responsible, knowing mistakes from the start, and since it knows mistakes and falls into them, it does not deserve pity. Self-compassion begins when we get rid of the 3 aforementioned fallacies, so we feel that 1. Ourselves are not our own, and they, 2. do not represent us but are separate from us, and we, 3. are not mature and responsible, but rather weak, vulnerable, and ignorant, deserving of pity. With these revisions, we see ourselves independently, and we naturally sympathize with them, as we naturally sympathize with other independent beings. We said that the first reason for a person's lack of self-compassion is their feeling of ownership of themselves. while they sympathize with others due to their feeling of not owning others. This is confirmed by statements repeated by humans to themselves, such as, "I am free to do whatever I want with myself. Leave me alone. I can punish or praise myself as I please." These are statements that confirm a person's feeling of ownership of themselves. A person will begin to sympathize with themselves when they realize that their self is not their own, but it belongs to their Lord. So if it is not their own, they will realize that they have no right to criticize it and harm it, but they must protect it and sympathize with it. This idea is confirmed by Islam, which prohibits suicide because the self is not owned by humans to kill it, but it belongs to God, who will hold accountable anyone who transgresses against it. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Whoever kills himself with an iron weapon, then his weapon will be in his hand, thrusting it into his belly in the fire of hell, dwelling therein eternally. And whoever drinks poison and kills himself, then he will be sipping it in the fire of hell, dwelling therein eternally." It is a threat to those who harm themselves, as the self is one of the 5 necessities that Islam commands to be preserved, along with intellect, religion, honor, and wealth. Whoever is killed defending these 5 is a martyr. When we feel that we do not own ourselves, we sympathize with them and fear wasting their rights. The Prophet Muhammad agreed with Salman al-Farsi when he said, "Your Lord has rights over you, yourself has rights over you, and your family has rights over you. So give everyone their due right," thus giving the self-independent rights that must be fulfilled for the self as independent as the rights of independent family members. Allah says, "O you who have believed, protect yourselves and your families from a fire." Allah commanded His prophets to preserve the rights of the self and not to wrong it. So He also said, "O my people, indeed you have wronged yourselves," as well as commanding to be gentle and merciful to it, saying, "And do not kill yourselves. Indeed, Allah is to you ever merciful, and Allah does not burden a soul beyond its capacity." These are verses that confirm that you do not own yourself to criticize it as you please. So, if you do not sympathize with yourself out of love for it, then start sympathizing with it out of fear of being punished and asked about it on the Day of Judgment. Yes, remember this well. If you do not show mercy to yourself and sympathize with it out of love and appreciation for it, then show mercy to yourself and sympathize with it out of fear of being asked about its rights on the Day of Judgment, for it is not yours. On a non-religious level, what confirms that you do not own yourself is that you are not satisfied with its shape and appearance, and you cannot control its appearance before its birth, as all of that is inherited genetics. You do not own this self from the beginning to shape it as you wish. So if you do not like your shape, appearance, or face, remember the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, "Your body has rights over you, for this body in which you dwell has the right to comfort and acceptance, as it is the image of God on which you were formed." In short, have mercy on yourself and sympathize with it, for it is an independent being, deserving of compassion and care. So, the first way to sympathize with oneself is to increase awareness that we do not own ourselves, so we have no right to criticize it, but it is our duty to sympathize with it. We said that the second reason for not sympathizing with oneself lies in our ability to see others as separate in front of our eyes, and our inability to see ourselves as separate when we are alone. So, if we could see ourselves as separate, we might sympathize with ourselves. This confirms that when we pass by a glass storefront, we stop for a moment and look at ourselves in astonishment. We see a different person who has gained weight or changed their appearance, or has a strange gait. We used to have a different view of ourselves than what we see now. It is a moment of awareness, confirming that we are unable to separate from ourselves enough to understand our external image. So how is the case with our internal image that we cannot see? So, the problem lies in that when you want to sympathize with yourself, you cannot separate from it to treat it as you treat others. Therefore, we need techniques that help us feel separate from ourselves and prepare us to sympathize with ourselves. For example, try to sit in your place now and close your eyes, then try to jump with your imagination and look at your image from the angle of the door. You will see yourself. You will see a person sitting in the place where you are now. It is yourself that you are watching. You will see him with closed eyes, contemplating with himself. You might also see him with one leg crossed over the other, because this is how you are sitting now. The question, who is this person who sees you now? Some people say it is the soul traveling away to see you, and some others claim it is the consciousness seeing you from another perspective. The message is, compassion begins when you feel that you are two parts, not one indivisible part. When you separate from yourself, you will treat it as a separate person deserving of compassion, and this is the dilemma that we must overcome first. One of the reasons that prevent you from feeling like a separate individual is your self-talk with yourself. You speak to yourself in an unheard voice and understand everything you say to yourself, which confirms that you are one inseparable unit. Therefore, it can be said that your compassion for yourself will increase when you raise your voice and speak to yourself loudly. Try speaking to yourself internally and repeat, "I accept myself and empathize with it" 10 times. Then try repeating the same phrase aloud as if you were a separate person. Then ask yourself, why do you feel a noticeable improvement when you hear your own voice? Speaking aloud to yourself is the beginning of accelerating self-compassion. When you raise your voice with your words, you declare that you are speaking to another independent person. You will now understand why you get excited when you hear encouragement from others, while you don't get excited when you hear your own encouragement. People's encouragement is heard by your ears, while your own encouragement to yourself is not heard clearly. Try to empathize with yourself aloud 3 times a day, for example. Set a reminder on your phone in the morning, afternoon, and evening to speak to yourself aloud, as one empathy you say to yourself once and aloud will have a much greater impact on you than 100 empathies you repeat to yourself internally. Audible voice is powerful energy. One of the tricks that make it easier for you to empathize with yourself and facilitate your separation from yourself is to look for your double, or what is known as a doppelganger. As they say, God creates 40 resemblances from each of us. Try searching for your double through these apps: Gradient, Celebs, Star by Face, Y-Star, a Like Me. Put your picture in the app and it will extract your double. Then ask yourself, do you accept your double and empathize with its shape, image, accept its flaws and mistakes? So why don't you accept yourself, especially since your double resembles you by 90% and differs from you perhaps by 10%. Put your double as your phone wallpaper, as this may remind you that you are a completely independent person and you deserve compassion. One of the ways that help you separate from yourself, to start empathizing with it, is to talk about yourself using the third-person pronoun using he and she, instead of the first-person pronoun I. It is a clever trick that makes you feel an independent person. Instead of saying, "I have made many mistakes, committed sins, stumbled in front of the crowds, and people saw me in a shameful state," try to refer to yourself with a third-person pronoun using your name. For example, say, John has made many mistakes, committed sins, stumbled in front of people, and people saw him in a shameful state. When you say something like this about yourself, you will first start to empathize with this John, which is your real name. Then you will start, secondly, to not care much about what John did, but you will justify his mistakes, just as you justify the mistakes of your friends. You can implement the previous idea by using journaling as well. Write John's story. That is, write your own story and narrative using the third-person pronoun and highlight your entire personality as the hero of the story. Then try to write the complications of the narrative and its difficult situations until you finally reach its end. It is an opportunity to explore yourself as the protagonist of the story. Since writing, unlike the thought process, is a slow process, it will contribute to slowing down your intrusive negative thoughts and stopping your critical judgments, as well as clarifying the recurring patterns in your self-talk, which facilitates their resolution and treatment. Write about yourself and explore your problems. Perhaps you will find that everything you go through are common human mistakes, deserving of compassion and empathy. You can also implement the previous idea using voice memos via your phone. Record yourself with your voice on your phone saying, "John has made mistakes, but do we understand why he made mistakes? He is not the only one who made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. But John's problem is that he sees his flaws and mistakes bigger than other people's flaws, while other people's flaws are smaller and smaller." Recording a 5-minute audio clip and listening to it 3 times a day will be like a dose of medicine, after breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as it will have a great impact on your life. This will make you listen to the story of another person with your name. This is a practice that contributes to your empathy with yourself and makes you feel completely separated from yourself, as you hear an external voice, not an internal one. Another problem that makes it difficult for you to separate from yourself is not feeling your own body. You feel an urgent need for another person to comfort you and hug you, or to pat you on the shoulder. Therefore, the compassionate touch is one of the methods to confirm your separation from yourself, to increase your self-compassion for it. In short, if you don't feel yourself, feel your body. Hold your heart with your hand to alleviate your fear. Pat your shoulder with your hand to alleviate your sadness. Hug yourself in what is called self-hug by wrapping your arms around yourself. Do this while listening to the 5-minute voice recording. Pat your shoulder while listening, so you increase your awareness of your separation and enhance your empathy with yourself. Another thing that makes it difficult for you to separate from yourself is not reminding yourself. You empathize with others because you see them regularly. And on this basis, one of the tricks to confirm your separation is to regularly communicate with yourself as well. Try to send yourself encouraging messages that make you appreciate yourself, be proud of your accomplishments, and empathize with your mistakes, so that the message comes as a surprise. Use mobile reminders and write a special encouragement in each reminder. Try to make 5 reminders for each day and make them repeat weekly so that the reminder comes out and you read the message as if it were from someone else. Make the reminders contain your name. "Oh, John, everything you fear is from the past." To prevent your mind from becoming accustomed to and bored with your sentences, try altering their formulations or converting them into questions. So, we said that self-compassion begins when you feel that you do not own yourself, and that you will be asked about it if you mistreat it, which will frighten you and push you to empathize with it. Your compassion will also increase when you separate from yourself and treat it as a separate person using the trick of audible conversation, extracting the double, using your name or the third pronoun, and then activating the reminders. The last reason that prevents you from self-compassion is your feeling that others are weak, fallible, and ignorant, deserving of pity, while you see yourself as mature and responsible, not weak, fallible, and ignorant. It is a fallacy that occurs because of your pursuit of perfection and your unawareness of human vulnerability in every person. Everyone, including you, is weak, fallible, poor, and deserving of compassion and empathy. You can feel entitled to compassion when you treat yourself as a child. It is a trick taken from the Castilian school called inner child parenting, and its goal is re-educating yourself or pampering yourself. It is a useful trick that pushes you to play the role of the nurturing father who raises a young girl with a delicate soul and spirit, who needs to take care of her psyche, build her personality, try to understand her needs, and stand by her. Proper education is done with softness and affection as we raise delicate children, not with severity and harshness as we discipline negligent employees. The idea of treating oneself as a child is based on an intuitive concept that the face of a human is a childish face. Try looking at your face in the mirror. Perhaps you'll see the child hidden inside you. Maybe you'll see a picture of your face when you were in elementary school. Try looking at the faces of your friends and observe their childish behaviors. Perhaps you'll see children's faces embodied in adults' bodies. Treating oneself as a child means directly practicing self-compassion. Yourself is now a young girl, which means you need to consider her rights as a separate personality. This means speaking to her with an audible voice, considering her feelings, standing by her, accepting her mistakes, seeking to nurture her, and dealing with her in every aspect as a nurturing father. Imagine yourself about to speak in front of a crowd and feeling fearful. Here, you need to empathize with yourself. You can do this by imagining yourself as your fearful daughter, as if she were your real 7-year-old daughter, expressing her fear of the crowd to you. What would you say to your daughter's self when she tells you she's afraid of speaking in front of the crowd? How would you convince and encourage her as a compassionate father? You need to talk to yourself and empathize with her as if she were your daughter. Saying aloud, for example, "Don't worry, my little girl. This fear you're feeling is natural. You'll present in front of your peers, and I'm here with you, wholeheartedly. I'm here to encourage you. Don't think about your previous withdrawal. It was just a self-training. I understand your fear, and I'm here with you now." Speaking to oneself as if she were a child and in an audible voice alleviates feelings of fear. You can also use the same trick to alleviate feelings of guilt and shame if you have fallen into shameful mistakes in the past. Here, you need to empathize with yourself as if she were your real 7-year-old daughter who has made the same mistakes as you. How would you nurture her? Try talking to yourself in an audible voice as if you were talking to your daughter. "No, my daughter, I will never accept this grief from you. Do as you wish because I fully accept you. Cheer up, I don't blame you. I have forgiven all your mistakes, and it's okay, my little girl, to make mistakes and learn. People make mistakes. You're growing up and making mistakes like everyone else. I don't accept seeing you broken." Treating oneself as a child is also a useful trick for dealing with feelings of rejection. When you feel socially rejected for a trait in you, such as being overweight or unemployed, imagine it as if it were your little girl who feels rejected because she's overweight or unemployed. You can address her with compassion, pity, and tenderness rather than severity, harshness, and coercion. You can say aloud to yourself, "You're not the only overweight one, my little girl. There's a segment of society who shares your suffering. You're not extreme enough to be discriminated against. However, my little girl, you need to do a little exercise. That's what we need, and I'm with you on this journey. So let's start." When you address yourself as a child, your language changes from scolding to guidance and from criticism to persuasion. Also, do this when you feel anxiety about people's judgments, about your appearance, image, body, gait, speech, hair, and teeth. You should directly assume that it's your 7-year-old self who's struggling, so you need to empathize with her to overcome her crisis. You might say aloud, "Come on, my little girl. Put your hand in my hand. Let's walk in front of people now and let them look at you. Open your chest because I'm proud of you. Show off your stomach to others and let them say what they want because I fully accept you as you are. Let them notice your hair because I don't judge you for anything. The important thing is I don't see you afraid and broken. So be proud of yourself, my little girl, because I stand by you wholeheartedly." Treating oneself as a child can also be helpful as a trick in decision-making. Perhaps you find yourself wanting to buy some luxuries but depriving yourself and being stingy with your money even though you can afford it. When you deprive yourself, remember that you're depriving your inner child. Make a moderate decision. If you feel like yourself wants something, treat yourself as a child and buy it for her. "I have nothing but you, and I'll buy it for you." Also, when you want new clothes but see yourself as not caring about clean clothes, try making a correct decision by talking to yourself as a child, speaking calmly and rationally. "My little girl, you must take care of yourself a little. I'll buy you the best clothes because you deserve more. Everyone indulges themselves, and you must care a little about this aspect, my little girl. Come on." Treating oneself as a child can also help with getting rid of habits. For example, if you have a bad habit, you can imagine yourself as your real little girl and lead her gently to get rid of that habit. "You, my little girl, buy too many clothes and luxuries unnecessarily. Yes, I don't want to deprive you, but it's a consumerist practice that may not benefit you, my little girl." Then try to offer alternatives. "What do you think, my little girl? If we direct the expenses of these luxuries to buy better alternatives for you? Come with me, I'll choose something you like." Yourself might resist you as your little girl does, crying and kicking her feet because you've deprived her of her toy. But remember that you need to convince yourself as you convince your little girl, with softness and kindness rather than harshness and coercion. Likewise, treating oneself as a child can help with managing stresses. When you work intensively and don't seek rest, realize that it's your child who has exhausted herself and that your child really deserves a rest. You might say, "I understand, my little girl, that this work is beneficial for you as the boss says, but you must not forget your rest and not exhaust yourself." You can also use it with the pressures of social conflicts, like saying to yourself, "What's wrong, my little girl? You're occupied with so-and-so a lot. Don't care about them. Have mercy on them because they're really immature." This pressure doesn't benefit you first. Relax and let them be busy with you. Treating oneself as a child directs her to manage various pressures and stresses in a more balanced way. Try treating yourself as a child for 2 weeks. Remember that there may be many tricks for self-compassion, but there is no idea as effective as the treating oneself as a child idea. It is a trick that can replace millions of tricks, and it is a lifestyle enough to deal with many life challenges if applied correctly. It's the $1 million idea, as they say. So try it for 2 weeks for you to see its real effect. Try it before deciding to ignore it completely. Try setting a timer to ring in the morning, afternoon, and evening, with an alert on the screen asking, "What are you thinking about, my little girl? And what do you want, my little girl?" It's an alert that will keep you constantly aware of the state of this soul. I mean, this deprived, muted, broken, and confused little girl. Finally, we have reached the final episode of the Self-Compassion course. We learned a lot in this course, and the best thing we learned is that self-compassion is no less important than self-esteem, and the rule, "Treat others as you would like to be treated," should not make you forget the rule, "Treat yourself as you would like to treat others." This makes you fairer and more balanced. We also learned that the beginning of compassion starts with sensing. 1. That we do not own ourselves and that we must remember her rights over us. And 2. Treating ourselves as separate by invoking the strategies of the double, the audible voice, the third pronoun, the notes, recordings, and alerts. And 3. Installing ourselves as fathers to a young girl within us, trying to nurture her with kindness and goodness. This training course, Self-Compassion, is taken from the book Training Courses by Muteb Alqarni.